They found her clearing out her locker at 4:22 on a Friday afternoon. The same afternoon, Marcus Osei-Bonsu announced to his board of directors that Pinnacle Estates was cutting operational staff by 40%. Chidinma Achebe did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She folded her uniform, the burgundy one, with the gold trim she had worn for 11 years. Slowly and deliberately, the way her grandmother had taught her to fold cloth in Enugu, as though the fabric were something precious that would outlast the hands that held it. She placed it on the top shelf of the locker, smoothed it flat with both palms, and closed the metal door with a soft click that no one in the hallway seemed to hear. She had $43.70 in her purse, a transit card with one ride left on it, and a name that nobody in that building was going to remember by Monday morning. What none of them knew, not the HR administrator who had handed her the envelope, not the security officer who had walked her to the service exit on Marble Arch Close, not Marcus Osei-Bonsu himself, who had not come down from the 14th floor, was that Chidinma Achebe had been watching this company for 11 years, the way a person watches a fire they suspect will eventually reach their house. She had been taking notes, not on paper, in a mind that had never once forgotten a figure it encountered. 3 years later, the name on the door to the top-floor office at Pinnacle Estates was not Marcus Osei-Bonsu's. It was hers. Chidinma Adaise Achebe was 36 years old the morning she first walked into Pinnacle Estates, and 37 pounds lighter than she had been the year her father died, and left the family with a debt to the township cooperative that took her mother 4 years to resolve. She was 5'4", with hands that were slightly rough at the knuckles from the cleaning work she had done before this job. And she wore a black cardigan over a white blouse that she had pressed the night before using an iron she shared with the woman in the room next to hers at the boarding house on Meridian Lane. The cardigan had a small loose thread at the left cuff. She had tucked it inside. She had 47 Naira equivalent in savings when she took the job. She had not told anyone that. She carried herself into that building on her first day the way someone carries a secret, carefully, with awareness of its weight, and with a specific kind of dignity that comes not from having very much, but from deciding once and for all exactly what you will not surrender. Her grandmother, Mama Ugochi, had given her a purse when she left Enugu. Brown leather, the clasp shaped like a small leaf, stitched by hand sometime in 1989 in a market stall near the university. The leather had softened over the years into something that felt less like an object and more like a skin. Chidinma kept two things in it at all times: a folded photograph of her mother standing in front of their house in Enugu on the morning Chidinma passed her secondary school exams, and a small notebook the size of a playing card in which she wrote, in handwriting so small it required squinting, every financial figure she encountered in her working life that she believed someone had tried to hide. She had started the notebook in 2009 at a previous employer's estate after she noticed that the household grocery account was being charged for items that appeared in no kitchen she had ever cleaned. She had not confronted anyone. She had simply written the figures down. Her skill was this: she understood money the way some people understand music, not theoretically. In the body, she could look at a column of numbers and feel the wrong ones, the way a piano tuner feels a string that is slightly off. She had never taken a formal accounting course. She had learned from her father, who had managed the cooperative's books for 12 years, and from her own habit of observation, which had been running uninterrupted since she was 8 years old. In 11 years at Pinnacle Estates, she had cleaned Marcus Osei-Bonsu's office 47 times when he was not present. She had read nothing on his desk that was not visible from a standing position. She had written 41 figures into the small notebook, and she had never once, in 11 years, been asked a single question about what she had observed. That was the assumption, that a woman in a burgundy cleaning uniform, moving through a 14th floor office with a mop and a caddy of supplies, was not watching, was not understanding, was not building anything. Marcus Osei-Bonsu had built Pinnacle Estates over 22 years from a single commercial property on the edge of the East Legon district of Accra into a firm that now managed 47 residencial complexes, 14 commercial towers, and a hospitality portfolio that stretched from Accra to Abuja to the diaspora market in South London. It was 54 years old, and he wore his success the way some men wear expensive watches, not to tell time, but to be seen telling it. The woman who sat at the reception desk on the ground floor of Pinnacle's headquarters was named Blessing. She had held that position for 6 years. She had a nameplate on her desk that read Blessing O, and she had a way of looking at people when they arrived at her desk, from the face down to the shoes, then back up again. That could communicate without a single word whether someone was worth her time. Chidinma had walked past that desk 1,143 times in 11 years. She had never once been looked at from the shoes up. The gatekeeping at Pinnacle was not the dramatic kind. There were no shouting matches, no locked doors, no security guard stationed to turn people away. It was quieter than that. It was the kind that operated through assumption. The assumption that people who arrived through the service entrance had not come with anything to say. The assumption that a woman who changed the bin liners in the executive washroom had not come with information that could change the company's future. The assumption, most fundamentally, that the people who kept the place running were not also the people who understood exactly how it worked. Chidinma had understood this for 11 years. She had also understood that understanding it and doing something with it were separated by a specific problem: capital. She had $43.70. What happened next was not luck. It required the particular combination of a person who had prepared for a long time and an opening that arrived in a form no one else recognized as an opening. The letter arrived at the boarding house on Meridian Lane on a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks after Chidinma was walked to the service exit. It was not a letter she had been expecting. It was from the office of Yao Osuboteng, an attorney whose firm occupied a suite on the third floor of a building on Kwame Nkrumah Circle in Accra. The letter informed her that she had been named as a beneficiary in the estate of one Emmanuel Tobena Achebe, her father's youngest brother, who had died in Abuja 8 months prior and had left behind, among other things, a specific instruction that a sum of money be held in trust until it could be delivered in person. She sat in the small chair near the window of her room at 7:14 a.m. and read the letter 3 times. The sum listed was 640,000 Ghanaian cedis. She sat still for 4 minutes. Then she opened the brown leather purse and took out the small notebook. She had been watching, she had been writing things down, and she had just been handed the one thing that separates a person who understands money from a person who can move it. She called the attorney's office at 7:23 a.m. If what she had been watching for 3 years in that notebook was accurate, and she had never yet encountered a figure she had misread, then there was a specific opportunity inside the current structure of Pinnacle Estates that no one with capital had been positioned to act on, for the simple reason that the people who had the capital had not been watching closely enough to see it. And the one person who had been watching closely enough had been cleaning the office where the information lived. She did not call anyone else that morning. She folded the letter. She placed it inside the purse, beside the photograph of her mother. She stood up, put on her cardigan, the black one, the one with the loose thread that she had now sewn back in, and walked to the transit stop. She spent the first 2 months after receiving the inheritance doing nothing that looked like action. She moved out of the boarding house on Meridian Lane and into a small one-bedroom flat near Cantonments. She ate quietly. She slept well for the first time in 6 years. She bought 2 suits from a tailor on Osu Oxford Street, one charcoal gray, one the color of deep water, and she had them fitted properly because she had learned, at 47 years old, that the difference between being heard in a room and being overlooked in a room is often a seam. She also met, during those 2 months, with 4 people. The first was Yao Osuboten, to complete the inheritance transfer and to ask a specific legal question about a gap in the corporate structure of Pinnacle Estates that she had first noticed in the 3rd year of her employment, and confirmed in year 90. The second was a woman named Pauline, who sold groundnuts at a stall near the entrance to Corlewood Teaching Hospital and who happened to be the older sister of Pinnacle Estates' former head of corporate finance, a man who had left the company in 2021 under circumstances that had never been publicly explained. Pauline had watched a great many things from her stall across the years. She had been waiting for someone to come and ask the right question. When Chidinma sat down across from Pauline on a low stool and said, "I need to understand what happened in the accounts between 2019 and 2021." Pauline reached under the stall counter and placed a folder on the groundnut sack between them. She had been keeping it for 2 years. She had not known who she was keeping it for. But she had known, with the certainty of a woman who has watched enough come and go from a corner stall, that someone would eventually arrive and know what it was. "Seat," sighed Pauline. "I have been waiting a long time to show somebody this." The folder contained 9 pages of internal correspondence, printed by a man who had not yet known he was being asked to resign. It contained numbers that confirmed what Chidinma had felt in her body for 3 years: the slightly off note, the string that didn't vibrate at the right frequency, and it contained the signature, at the bottom of a third-party transfer authorization, of a man whose initials appeared on the private letterhead she had seen, visible from a standing position, on the desk of the 14th floor office 47 times. She stayed at Pauline's stall for 2 hours. When she left, she walked to the transit stop in the charcoal gray suit and did not look at her phone once. She was thinking too carefully for that. The third person she met was a solicitor who specialized in corporate acquisitions. The fourth was a banker. If this story is hitting you the way I think it is, subscribe now. Because what she does with that folder is something Marcus Osebonsu never saw coming. The acquisition process took 14 months. It was quiet in the way that large movements are sometimes quiet, not because nothing was happening, but because the people watching were looking in the wrong direction. Marcus Osebonsu was, during those 14 months, focused on an expansion into the South London diaspora market that his board had approved in the second quarter. It was focused on the Abuja Hotel portfolio. He was focused on a profile piece being written about him by a business magazine based in Lagos. He was not focused on a small investment vehicle, newly registered, whose managing director was listed on the company's registry as C.A. Achebe, and whose initial stake acquisition in Pinnacle Estates had been structured very deliberately, through the category of shares least likely to trigger a notification, until the threshold had already been crossed. Chidinma had learned this structure from the notebook. Specifically, she had learned it from watching over 3 years how Marcus Osebonsu himself had assembled the voting bloc that had allowed him to remove the company's founding partners in 2017. She had been mopping the floor outside the boardroom when the vote was called. She had heard the names. She had written the structure in the notebook, in her smallest handwriting, because even then, she had understood that it was the kind of thing worth remembering. The threshold was crossed on a Tuesday morning at 10:14 a.m. Her solicitor called her while she was standing in her kitchen making tea. "It's done," he said. "Thank you," she said. She poured the tea. She stood at the window and looked at the street below, where a woman was walking with 2 children, each holding one of her hands. She watched them until they turned the corner. Then she called Marcos Osebonsu's office. His assistant, a young man named Tobena, who had been in the role for 8 months, and had therefore never worked alongside anyone in a burgundy cleaning uniform, took the call professionally and scheduled the meeting for the following Thursday at 11 a.m. He had not recognized the name. It would later describe the voice on the phone as calm, in a way that had made him write the appointment down twice, in 2 different places, without fully understanding why. The morning of the meeting, Chidinma arrived at Pinnacle Estates at 10:47. She was wearing the deep-water suit. She had her grandmother's brown leather purse on her left arm. She walked through the main entrance, not the service entrance, and crossed the lobby toward Blessing's desk. Blessing looked up. She looked at Chidinma's face, then down to her shoes, low-heeled, polished, dark brown, the heel not worn down. Then back up. "Good morning," said Chidinma. "I have a meeting with Mr. Osebonsu at 11. Blessing asked for a name. Chidinma gave it. Blessing typed something and something shifted in Blessing's face. Not dramatically, not in a way she would have admitted to anyone, but a small recalibration, like a scale adjusting after a heavier weight has been placed on it. "Of course," said Blessing. "I'll let Tobena know you're here." Chidinma sat in one of the chairs near the window. The lobby smelled of cleaning solution and the faint lavender of the fabric softener used on the upholstered furniture. She knew the exact brand. She had ordered it herself in 2018, when the previous supplier raised their prices and no one else had thought to find an alternative. Tobena appeared at 10:53 and escorted her to the elevator. The 14th floor, the door she had knocked on with a cleaning caddy 47 times, the carpet she had vacuumed in long, careful stripes, because Marcus Osebonsu preferred the pile to run in one direction. The desk by the window, the one where the documents had been visible from a standing position. Marcos Jose Bonsu was standing when she entered. It was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of physical presence that had for 2 decades allowed him to occupy rooms in a way that preempted questions. It was looking at her with an expression she recognized. It was the expression of a man who was rapidly reclassifying a situation he thought he had already understood. He did not say her name. He said, "Miss Achebe." "Yes," she said. He gestured to the chair across the desk. She sat. She placed the purse on her knee. She looked at him without hurry. He had, in the past 18 hours, spoken to his legal team, his board chair, and his lead banker. He understood, structurally, what had happened. He had not yet understood how. "You worked here," he said. "I did," she said, "for 11 years." A silence. Not an awkward silence. The silence of a room rearranging itself. "I need to understand." "I know you do," she said. "And I'm going to explain it to you. But first, I'd like you to look at something." She reached into the purse and placed on the desk, in the same spot where the documents had sat, visible from a standing position, on 47 different afternoons. The 9 pages from Pauline's folder, paper clipped in order, with the third-party transfer authorization on top. His hand went still on the desk. She watched him. She did not speak. She had learned, over 11 years in rooms where she was not expected to be paying attention, that silence is not the absence of power. It is often its purest form. "Where did you get this?" he said. "That's the second conversation," she said. "The first conversation is what you're going to do now that I have it." He sat down. He looked at the pages. His hand, which had been resting flat on the desk, curled slightly at the fingers, not into a fist, just a small contraction, the body registering something the face was working not to show. For 4 minutes, the only sound in the 14th floor office was the faint ambient hum of the city through the glass. "What do you want?" he said. Not aggressively, carefully, the way a man asks a question when he has just understood that the answer determines everything. "A board seat," she said, "full oversight of operations and finance, and a structural audit of every third-party transfer authorization from 2017 to the present, conducted by an independent firm, results submitted to the full board." She paused. "And," she said, "I want the cleaning staff reinstated, all 41 of them, with retroactive pay from the date of their dismissal." He looked at her. She looked at him. "That's all?" he said. "That's the beginning," she said. "But it's where we start." The board met 6 days later. The vote was not close. The structural audit was commissioned within the week, conducted by a firm with no prior relationship to Pinnacle Estates, and its findings, which were not made public in their entirety, though certain elements became known, resulted in the quiet departure of 2 senior executives and the restructuring of the company's finance committee, whose new chair was appointed in the first week of the following month. Her name was Chidinma Adese Achebe. She was 47 years old. She had started in that building with a cleaning caddy and a transit card with one ride on it. She brought the 41 reinstated staff members back on a Monday. She was there when they arrived. She stood in the lobby and she shook every hand. Some of them recognized her. Some did not. The woman who had handled the bathroom supplies on floors 7 through 11 looked at Chidinma's deep-water suit and then at her face and then pressed her lips together and looked away quickly. The way people look away from something they don't want to cry about in a lobby. Chidinma did not say anything about that. She just held the woman's hand for 1 moment longer than a handshake and then moved to the next person. Marcus Jose Bonsu thought he was doing a practical thing when he handed Chidma Achebe that envelope. He thought he was reducing a cost. He thought he was managing a line on a spreadsheet, and the line had a value, and he had removed it, and the spreadsheet would now balance in the direction he needed. What he did not understand, what he had never been in a position to understand, because he had never once looked at her the way a person looks at another person, was that the line on his spreadsheet had been the most expensive thing he owned. Not because of what she cost, because of what she knew. Because of what she had been carrying in a small notebook in a brown leather purse, in the careful handwriting of a woman who had learned from her father how to read the language of money. For 11 years. He thought he was closing a chapter. He was, without knowing it, handing her the key to the building. This is the truth the world keeps being surprised by, though it happens constantly and has always happened. The people who run things are rarely the people with their names on the door. They are often the people in the room that nobody looked at. The ones who arrive early and leave late. The ones who know which supplier charges the fair price and which one is skimming the difference. The ones who have learned, through necessity and patience, to understand every system they move through. Because when you are not handed power, you learn the next best thing. You learn how power works. You can let a person go. You can change the lock, hand them a cardboard box, walk them to the service entrance, and tell yourself that the story is over. But you cannot take back what they have already learned. You cannot unteach a mind that has been watching. And you cannot take back 11 years of observation from a woman who never once forgot a figure. Some people are handed a beginning and call it an ending. Chidinma Achebe was handed an ending and understood. On the way down, in the service elevator with her folded uniform and her $43.70, that it was the beginning of the only move she had been positioned her whole life to make. The night Marcus Osei Bonsu closed the envelope and handed it across his assistant's desk, he was not thinking about the woman who would receive it. He was thinking about his quarterly projections. Chidinma was thinking about everything she had written in the notebook, and the distance between those two things, between a man who doesn't think about a woman he has dismissed and a woman who has been thinking about everything, is exactly the width of the door she walked back through 3 years later, not through the service entrance, through the front. Here is what I want to ask you before you go. If you had been watching a place for 11 years, learning how it worked, learning where the cracks were, learning what nobody who was supposed to notice had noticed, and then, one day someone handed you an envelope and walked you to the back door, would you call that the end of your story? Or would you sit quietly for a while and then start counting everything you already had? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. If this is the kind of story you needed today, the kind about the ones the world overlooks until they change everything, subscribe. Every story on this channel is about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people who kept the whole thing running while someone else took the credit. You don't want to miss the next one. I'll see you in the next one.